VR is a space of gaming that is yet to be explored to the extent that it deserves. Many popular kinds of games that have large saturation and flat-screen gaming still have a massive gap to be filled in the VR world. I'm one of many people who have noticed the lack of a good action PvP VR game, which is why I'm here proud to present probably the best VR PvP game ever made. Many people might be thinking of some shooter game like Pavlov or some other action game like Rumble. But why play a VR earthbending game when you can play a game with all four? And I'm talking about Elements Divided. Elements Divided is a VR game where you choose your element between the classic four: fire, earth, water, and air. And you use them to defeat the competition, whether it be other players with their own element of choice, or those pesky robots that want in on the action. Each element has its own playstyle and set of moves that differentiate them wildly from each other, and we'll get to talking about the elements in just a second. First, I think it's important to note that Elements Divided is still in its beta phase, and while it's nearing launch and might be out in just a couple of months by the time you see this video, anything here is still subject to relatively small change. Now, let us get into what everyone is here for, the elements. I'm going to be talking about water, which is my favorite element. Water is an element all about mobility, and large but weak projectiles. Your two main moves that the playstyle revolves around are your water tentacle arms and the water wave. These water arms are essential for maneuvering around the battlefield and dodging precision attacks. Meanwhile, the wave is a wide and maneuverable projectile that can also speed you around briefly and be thrown at people to catch them off guard. You can also freeze the wave into an ice wall that, while completely incapable of blocking literally anything, is a nice, wide projectile that you can combo the wave out of for some sweet damage. Your main projectile that you'll actually get hits with is your water bubble, where you expel a small bubble from you that grows quickly once thrown. Another useful quirk of it is that it pops when hitting an opponent or damaging surface, knocking away and disorientating people. Or it can also be used for mobility using this quirk. Some other notable water moves are the Water Saw, a nice, wide projectile with large range and good damage, but it breaks very easily. Water Knives, small and nimble projectile that's hard to break. A Knife Grapple, derived from the knives, that can be used to recover from the stage or to hit somebody from really far away. And Ice Storm, water's only non-breakable projectile, which is also great for area denial, as it leaves a damaging area of effect, and it can also go through earth walls, allowing you to have a little bit of offense through walls. Some other less notable but neat moves are the basic water bolts and icicles, an octopus form derived from the water tentacles, a frozen ice trail, and a water jet hover. As mentioned before, water likes to be very nimble and always moving, so most of their projectiles are wide and easier to hit, so you can land them while moving at high speeds. To compensate for this, all of them, except the Ice Storm mentioned before, can be broken by attentive opponents fairly easily, meaning water players have to be very smart about how they use each of their tools to get the win. Now, to talk about fire, I have here Corvus. They are our resident evil fire expert. Yes, evil. Once a prestigious waterbender, like me, they ended up joining the dark side of firebenders and spend their days converting new players to their evil ways. Thus, they'll give fire justice with its review. Take it away, Corvus.
My element is fire. I'm one of the best known players for fire currently, and this element is definitely an easy element to get the hang of at the start of your playtime, but in my personal opinion, fire has a lot more potential than just spamming moves or using a laser constantly due to its potential in movement. It doesn't have a lot of defense necessarily, but it's definitely one of the best elements for movement, rivaling air, if I would say. But it's definitely lacking in defense completely, just because it's not really the best at blocking moves without like using the block. With fire, it's a lot easier to evade than to block head-on attacks. I would say it's also really good offense for pressuring your opponent, A lot of the time you can spam projectiles, but the best move for fast attack and constant attack would probably be the fire bow. It's a really heavy amount of damage, especially if you charge your attack with it, and charging with fire is probably very essential for dealing any amount of good damage you want to deal. If you ever have a situation where you're not necessarily attacking or getting attacked and you're just on a standoff basis, shooting a couple arrows or a few arrows definitely helps. If you look at Fire Wave as some sort of attack, I wouldn't recommend attacking with Fire Wave. It just doesn't have the range compared to other things that is definitely a lot better with fire. I use Fire Wave or Fire Blast as a movement base that allows for a really good height when you want to go up. You can use it as backward propulsion just to get away from your opponent. It's great at getting out of tight situations. And for an up close attack that you want to do a ton of damage with that's like Blast, I would recommend doing Flamethrower both hands towards the player, just because that does significantly more damage and a little bit more range, and also doesn't launch you back as far. Some of the moves aren't necessarily the most useful in most cases. Like if you take Fire Dagger, you can find uses for that in some cases, but very rarely will you use it constantly. Or Fire Whip is one of the same. You can't really get as much range as it, and there's a better alternative with Fire Spear, which is a better alternative to Whip, definitely. Something I do want to mention is that Fire Orb can be a very powerful move in some cases. A lot of the time, if your player is trying to move really fast around you and you can't aim your projectiles, doing a nice Fire Orb spam can just get them away from you, and if they run into one of those, then it triggers a massive explosion between all of them if they're close enough, and that deals a ton of damage. I want to say fire is definitely a more avoidant style of element rather than constant damage. Once you get the hang of it, your best bet will be targeting a player for the entirety until they're defeated, because getting up close and personal with an opponent renders them very confused and leaves a lot of openings. But yeah, as the Resident Evil fire player, I think that's a pretty good conclusion.
Next up is Earth. Our Earth expert is actually one of the longest active players in the game. Orphan is very passionate for Earth supremacy. With their intolerance for any Earth slander, they will surely prove why Earth is totally the best element in the game. No cap, for real. Take it away, Orphan.
Hello everybody, my name is Orphan Obliterator, but you can just call me Orphan, and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite element inside the entire game, Earth. Earth's playstyle isn't as set in stone as some may believe. With Earth, you can be extremely defensive, but you can also be extremely aggressive and get a lot of high damage in. Almost every single one of your moves is going to consist of you grabbing something from the Earth and turning it into something to attack with. But there are two moves, if I'm remembering correctly, that do not have this happen. The first being Earth Hammer, where you just summon it in front of you, and the second being Earth Armor, where you bring your hands to your left and right while you are grounded, and you hold the triggers, giving yourself a coating of Earth Armor. Now, due to the fact that you have to be on the ground to use basically every single one of your moves, you would be forgiven to think that you should probably stay grounded the whole game. Forgiven? Yeah. But I can't help with the shame that you're going to feel whenever you see me flying through the air and all the other Earth players coming up with some crazy techs that do not involve you staying on the ground. Let's talk a little bit about the kind of moves that you're going to be using. Your first, and it better be your most used move, is going to be the glorious king of all moves, the Earth Wall. This is by far the most fun, most unique, and strongest move in the entire game, and if anybody tells you that a different move is stronger, they are wrong. Briefly speaking, without getting into too much detail, because I don't know how much time Carp is giving me, Earth Wall is the best because it's your movement, it's your defense, it's your offense, and it's every single thing in between. It's your bread and butter, and you better get used to waiting that 1.5 second to pull up your fully charged Earth Wall and then snapping it off to do something with it. It's like a multi-tool, and you better learn how to use it. A few other unimportant moves, inside no particular order, that are decent are your filler moves, such as the ball, the saw, the spike, all the same move, ignore all of them. The hammer, ignore that hammer. The trap is actually pretty good. You throw it on the ground, it slides across, and it traps people in place for a few seconds. Very good to use with the best move in the game, the Earth Wall. Your strengths are going to be your defense, since a fully charged Earth Wall blocks basically every attack. It might break sometimes, but that's okay. It's also going to be your mobility, because a Earth Wall can be used to run across the arena or launch in the air and go massive speeds. And finally, your offense, because the Earth Wall, sorry, I know, I just love the Earth Wall, can do massive amounts of damage, and you can basically two-shot people if you get a good hit and it bounces on them multiple times. Now, the final thing I'm going to touch on, because I'm definitely going over my time, is Earth weaknesses. Now, Earth doesn't have many weaknesses, but one of them it does have is if you're mid-air and they break your wall, you're kind of stuck. So don't get stuck mid-air without your wall. The second thing, and I'm sorry, don't kill me for saying this, it has a really strong reliance on like one or two moves. So you don't have a lot of stuff you can do move-wise, but you do get a lot of fun stuff you can do tech-wise, which I definitely don't have time to talk about the techs. But thank you, Cart, for having me on here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.
Next up is air, and talking about it, we have our resident Builder is very enthusiastic about his opinions, and is his own game dev as well. As the last airbender, because it's been bad for so long that no one else wants to play it, it's only fitting that he be the one and only to give his overview. Take it away, Builder.
I am the Builder NPC, and I reign supreme over all things air. I personally really like the air element and elements divided because its playstyle centers around being very evasive and getting in small amounts of chip damage when you can, and generally playing like a mosquito. The items in Air's kit that allow you to do this are the Air Sword, which allows you to bounce around your enemy very, very quickly, the Air Wheel, which allows you to run around the map at high speeds. I also really like the Air Tunnel. It's what gives airbending its chip damage ability, and it's really easy to aim and hit. Occasionally, I'll throw in a couple of air bolts or air tornadoes in order to get off some good damage as well. And if my opponent is being particularly troublesome and putting up their shield too much, a nice air drill will always go right through that and deal decent damage. There are also the charged up air ball and air laser, which can be pretty good in a pinch. In my opinion, airbending is a great element, but its shortcomings are when other players are very, very good at placing their high damage projectiles, such as fire players that can aim their fire arrows or earth walls, or really any water player that is particularly good at landing their projectiles. All of them can deal high damage and kill you before you can kill them, and it's crucial to avoid these. Air is really good against players who don't have a good sense of direction though. If you can disorient them, they are not going to be able to find you, and you can kill them quite easily. And in my opinion, that is the most fun way to take somebody out.
In addition to Air's ordinary playstyle, there's also an optional modifier you can turn on that can be applied to any element, but I find it works best for Air, where your elemental damage is halved, but your punch damage is doubled, as well as you getting a passive speed buff overall. It is absolutely hilarious to create openings for yourself with your different air moves and getting an absolute beat down on the opponent. And just as they try to run away, you pull them back in with your vacuum, slam them back on the ground, and get another hit in. You combo that over and over. Usually it can be countered by people who will just knock you away with a bubble or like an earth pillar or something, but especially against people who are less aware, you can get a surprise attack in, and it's really satisfying to get those punches in, even if it doesn't happen very often. Now that you're familiar with the elements themselves, there are also additional combat mechanics that apply to all elements, such as a block that can prevent damage from weak projectiles but still allow stronger ones some chip damage, a parry when timing your block perfectly that will always prevent all damage from that one hit, 2 dash charges that allow you to get some burst mobility in any direction when needed, which recharge over time, a capture point that appears in the middle of the map after some time, which encourages people to get into the fray, as standing in this point for a certain amount of time will give that player the win. And lastly, ultimates. Every element has their own ultimates that charge up over time when blocking, parrying, and landing your hits, which can drastically change the tide of the battle when used properly. The game also allows enormous creativity with playstyles and moves, and the community is always finding new techs and ways to use moves in new exciting methods. Next up are the maps. Elements Divided has a decent playlist of stages to choose from. There's a quadrants map that changes its 4 corners to different themes to make it a different battlefield each time. A flat chessboard for all your Final Destination fans out there. A village, dojo, and multi-layered construction site for a more cover-oriented battlefield. A large bridge brawl that fits many fighters at once, and some crazier maps like Turbo Cage, Space Rings, Drifters, and Amphitheater for people who love wild maps that test you in more ways than just combat. Also worth noting is the game's hub world, a large floating island with its own secrets to find in addition to its status as just an intermission backdrop. From the hub world, you can also find many customization options, like the ability to switch which ultimate you want to use between 2 options, though there might be more added soon. A character customizer with a large selection of parts, colors, and aesthetics, all unlockable, obviously for free, and the ability to select 2 passives called techniques that can switch up your strategy a ton, some of which also being element specific. These techniques can range from doing more damage with your walls in the air, to healing when you hit anyone with a water-based move, or even increasing the radius of all of your fire explosions. This one was kind of crazy a bit ago before it got changed. Jesus Christ. If there are no players online, worry not. There is a decent single player experience as well, which can also be tackled co-op with any of your friends. There are many difficulties and scenarios to choose from, each of which are unlocked in a campaign-based fashion. Some of these levels even include bosses, giant robots, and even some master benders for you to face off against. Some of my favorite enemies are the little cube guy, the stupid little rodents that run after you and explode, and the drones that shoot hollow burgers at you. The bosses are also pretty cool. More are being added soon, but for now, we have the evil robot man, the funny ice gorilla, and the fire boss who prefers to just touch you to instantly kill you. The game also has awesome lore made by the community that was deemed canon by the absolutely base developers. I won't go into it here for the sake of maintaining the sanity of the viewers though. And with that, you're now an expert on Elements Divided. In the description of this video, you can find the link to join the beta of the game for absolutely free. The only caveat being that you must be over 18 for the sake of meta policies. So come on down and join this awesome community. Also, while recording this video, it's been officially announced that the release date for Elements Divided is on April 23rd, 2025. So mark your calendars, folks, it's going to be one hell of a time.